Listen carefully because this is one of those stories that doesn't start with shouting or scandal or anything dramatic on the surface, but quietly in places where nobody thinks to look. And by the time the damage becomes visible, someone's life has already been pushed to the edge. This is the story of a woman who did everything right, followed every rule, worked harder than she was ever asked to, and still found herself slowly erased, not because she failed, but because someone else decided she didn't belong. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Who are you, and where are you watching from right now? What city? What country? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if stories about real choices, real injustice, and real consequences matter to you, take a second right now to subscribe to the channel and like this video because it truly helps these stories reach the people who need them. Now let me tell you about Naomi Carter. Naomi worked at one of the most powerful financial firms in the city. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to be anyone's favorite. She showed up early, stayed late, and made sure her work spoke for itself. And it did. Her reports were precise. Her forecasts were accurate. Clients trusted her, and internally, people relied on her more than they admitted out loud. She believed in a simple idea, that if you worked hard enough and stayed professional, the system would eventually be fair. For a while, it almost seemed like she was right. The company's CEO, Daniel Whitmore, noticed her performance early on. He didn't mentor her or publicly praise her, but he respected her results, and in his mind, that was enough. Daniel liked to think of himself as a fair man. Self-made, disciplined, rational. Someone who believed that personal issues stayed outside the office. That belief would later become his biggest blind spot. Things began to change the day Daniel's wife, Victoria, started showing up around the office more frequently. She wasn't an employee. She didn't have a title. But she had something far more powerful: proximity. She would stop by unannounced, sit in meetings she wasn't part of, make casual comments that everyone pretended not to notice. The first time, Victoria saw Naomi speaking confidently with Daniel about a project, something shifted. There was no confrontation, no scene, not even a word spoken directly to Naomi. Just a look, a pause, and a quiet decision that nobody else was aware of yet. After that, small things began to happen. Naomi stopped getting invited to certain meetings. Her ideas would be discussed later, rephrased, and presented by someone else. Feedback on her work changed tone. Where there had once been clarity, there was now vagueness. Where there had been trust, there was now doubt. Daniel started hearing comments from Victoria in private. Nothing obvious. Nothing he could point to as unfair. Just questions. Just concerns. She seems very confident, doesn't she? She's very close to you. Do you ever feel like she oversteps? Daniel didn't push back. He didn't investigate. He didn't think he needed to. After all, this was his wife. He trusted her instincts the same way he trusted his own. Meanwhile, Naomi felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, but she couldn't explain why. She checked her work twice, then 3 times. She stayed later than everyone else. She took on responsibilities that weren't hers, hoping that if she became indispensable enough, the tension would disappear. It didn't. It intensified. The language around her performance changed. She was described as difficult, as aggressive, as not fitting the culture. Words that sounded professional but carried a much heavier weight when placed on her shoulders. Her colleagues noticed. Some felt uncomfortable. Others were relieved it wasn't happening to them. Nobody spoke up. Silence became part of the system. The breaking point came when Naomi led a critical project that could secure a major client for the firm. She worked on it for weeks, sacrificing weekends, sleeping in her office more than once. The final presentation was flawless. Even Daniel admitted that it exceeded expectations. But within days, the project was suddenly under review. Questions were raised about Naomi's judgment. Mistakes were implied, but never clearly identified. Responsibility quietly shifted onto her. Daniel accepted the narrative that was placed in front of him because accepting it was easier than questioning where it came from. Naomi went home that night and sat in silence, staring at a future she no longer recognized. She wondered how someone could do everything right and still be treated like a problem. She wondered how much more she was supposed to endure just to exist in the space she had already earned. And she didn't know that behind the scenes, something was about to surface that would force everyone involved to finally look at what had been happening all along. There is a moment in every story like this when the truth doesn't arrive with drama, but with evidence, quiet, undeniable, and impossible to ignore once it's been seen. That moment came through an email that was never meant to change anything, but ended up changing everything. Marcus Hill worked in IT security. He wasn't close to Naomi, and he wasn't looking to be a hero. He was just doing his job when he noticed patterns that didn't sit right with him. Messages sent from personal accounts, instructions passed informally, decisions being influenced by someone who had no business making them. At first, he told himself it wasn't his place, that getting involved would only cause trouble. But the more he looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was systematic, intentional, and one person was paying the price for it. Marcus gathered what he found, not out of anger, but out of responsibility. And then he faced a choice: stay silent and protect himself, or speak up and risk everything. He sent the email to Daniel Whitmore late one night, attaching records, timelines, and communications that told a story Daniel had never bothered to ask for. When Daniel opened that email, the version of reality he had been living in collapsed. He read it once, then again. He cross-checked the data. He couldn't explain it away. The pattern was clear. Naomi hadn't failed. She had been pushed. And the person pushing her was someone he had trusted without question. Worse than that, he realized his inaction had made it possible. He hadn't been cruel, but he had been convenient. And in situations like this, convenience is just another form of complicity. Daniel spent the night alone in his office, not angry, not defensive, but deeply unsettled. The next day, he made decisions that couldn't be undone. He confronted Victoria with the information, calmly, without raising his voice. He didn't accuse her emotionally. He showed her facts. She denied them at first, then justified them. She framed her behavior as protection, as instinct, as something any wife would do. That explanation only made the truth clearer. This wasn't about love. It was about control. Daniel ended the conversation without theatrics. He didn't argue. He simply made it clear that her influence over his company was finished. Then he called Naomi into his office. She walked in expecting the worst. Instead, she heard something she had never been offered before: accountability. Daniel told her what he had learned. He apologized without conditions. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He acknowledged that he had failed to see her, failed to protect her, and failed to lead. Naomi listened, guarded, exhausted, and honest. She didn't soften the impact of what she'd endured. She didn't dramatize it either. She told the truth, plainly, and that was enough. Daniel offered her a promotion and a raise, but more importantly, he offered her autonomy and respect. Naomi didn't accept immediately. She thought carefully, knowing how things might look, knowing how easily narratives can be twisted. In the end, she accepted not because she needed validation, but because she had already earned it. Victoria disappeared from the company's orbit. There was no public fallout, no spectacle, just a quiet removal of power. Marcus returned to his work, knowing he might never be thanked, but also knowing he had done the right thing. And Naomi stayed, not as a survivor of injustice, but as someone who refused to be defined by it. This story isn't really about an email or a company, or even the people involved. It's about how harm often happens not through loud hatred, but through passive acceptance. It is about how easy it is to look away when injustice doesn't inconvenience us directly. And it's about the cost of finally choosing to see. Daniel lost the comfort of denial. Naomi reclaimed her dignity. And a system that had quietly failed was forced, at least once, to correct itself. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever seen something wrong and struggled with whether to speak up, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and like this video. These stories matter, and sharing them helps remind people that integrity isn't built in public moments, but in the choices we make when it would be easier not to choose at all.